Hello and welcome to another episode of All Fired Up with Brandon Ramsey. We're recording today's episode live at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time, Wednesday, June 26th. June 26th, that means that tonight is the NBA draft. Now, a couple things about the NBA draft this year. First and foremost, I feel like it's flown a little under the radar. Like there's a lot of people I know that follow college basketball, NBA basketball, the draft pretty closely that were texting me like, "Hey, I didn't realize the NBA draft started tonight." And then along with that, myself and the NBA draft is one of my favorite nights of the year. I'll admit that not until this morning did I know that this year the draft was split. The first round is tonight, and then the second round is tomorrow. I had no idea that that was the case. So, just a couple fun little notes about the NBA draft sneaking up on us here on Wednesday night, June 26th. But that certainly will be what we are following this evening in the Ramsey household and what we're going to be talking about on today's show. So, as we get started, first of all, please smash the like button if you are here and enjoying the content as always. Also, please make sure you are subscribed to the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show here on YouTube, where every Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time, we host these live episodes of All Fired Up with Brandon Ramsey. Also, you can find the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show on podcast, Spotify, wherever you do listen to your podcast episodes every Monday and Friday. Actually, going to be announcing today, we're taking a quick, probably 2 to 3 week break from the podcast. Actually in the search of finding a kind of somebody like a producer type to help me out with that and help hopefully then kind of explode the growth a little bit more rapidly. So we're probably going to be taking a couple of weeks off of the podcast, but generally speaking, the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show every Monday and Friday on Spotify. And then also, as always, make sure you catch all of my content, whether it be my written work on KentuckySportsRadio.com, part of the On3 Sports Network, whether it be this YouTube show, the podcast, all of that good stuff, and much more. You can follow me on Twitter at BRamseyKSR. Eddie Congress in the comments says, I had no idea about the draft being 2 days till yesterday either. Seems like a lousy idea. Yeah, to me, like, obviously with the NFL draft, like that thing, just dredges on forever, 7 rounds. I can understand why the NFL draft takes a couple few days. NBA draft's 2 rounds, 58 picks. I like, yeah, the end of the second round always kind of got a little long, but like putting the second round on its own night, I feel like that's almost going to lose viewership. Like even if the time's better, like the draft junkies, the basketball junkies are obviously going to watch it no matter what. But maybe the casual fan who would have watched the first round and maybe just kept it on in the background, like I don't think they're going to turn it on Thursday night now because they don't care who goes in the second round. I guess maybe this year, other than seeing if Bronny gets drafted, that might bring some eyeballs in for the second round. But yeah, I don't really understand splitting it up, but obviously, everything's about everything's about commercials and TV money and all of that. Travis says, I think regardless they don't watch. Yeah, I'm not sure if a lot of people are tuning into the second round of the NBA draft much anyway. But in terms of today's topics in regards to the NBA draft, and obviously, as always, those of you who are joining me live, please be sure to leave any comments or questions in the chat as we go along. If you have questions about a certain prospect or just want to sound off on who you like, who you don't like for this year's draft, please do so in the chat. We will begin with talking about the Kentucky guys. I guess technically there's 5 draft eligible players from last year's team. Trey Mitchell is not considered a draft prospect, so we won't really delve into him at all. But at the top of the draft, Reed Sheppard and Rob Dillingham projected to be lottery picks. Reed probably towards the top of that lottery. Dillingham seems to be sliding a little bit, but we'll get into that in a second. And then Justin Edwards and Antonio Reeves hopefully will get picked up somewhere in the second round. Starting with Reed Sheppard, who is projected. I have 3 mock drafts pulled up, the 3 people that I respect the most when it comes to draft analysis, that being Kevin O'Connor at The Ringer, Jonathan Giovanni at ESPN, and then Sam Vecini at The Athletic. Those are my 3 draft gurus that I trust, that I go to for information on the draft, and that I'll be referencing some throughout today's show. But all three of them across the board have Reed Sheppard going number 3 to the Houston Rockets. Now, the Houston Rockets had some picks involved in the big New York Knicks trade last night. I don't think, from what I've seen and read, that that'll have much impact on who they draft here at number 3, but I do think that there's some talk about the Rockets still being active on draft night, which obviously could then impact who they draft, where they draft, etc. But it does seem like a general consensus that Reed Sheppard, as presently slotted, would go number 3. With that are my thoughts on Reed Sheppard. Now, I voiced them on Twitter at BRamseyKSR over the last couple of months. It stinks, and we've talked about this with Kentucky, Arkansas stuff, and it's true here with Reed Sheppard. Obviously, as somebody who covers Kentucky basketball, who's a Kentucky fan, I feel like that anything negative that I say about Reed Sheppard, especially since he's a Kentucky kid, gets amplified and you get labeled as a hater or whatever. Couldn't be further from the truth. Reed Sheppard was incredibly awesome this year as a freshman. I think he has a chance to be a good NBA player. I would draft him in the lottery if I was an NBA GM. Part of that is because this draft stinks, really stinks. But at the same time, I don't see it with Reed Sheppard as a top 5 pick, number 3 pick, even in this draft. I think that there are some concerns, in my opinion, about him being able to create his own shot. When you look back at Kentucky, he took a lot of open shots, turned down a lot of contested shots, some of which we were all screaming all year for him to squeeze off more. Like, there's no reason to be a 50% three-point shooter. Like, you need to increase the volume at the risk of decreasing your percentage a little bit if you're making that many. And he seemed unwilling or unable to do that at Kentucky. I think his athleticism translates. I think some of his passing ability and kind of court awareness offensively translates. And I think obviously his catch and shoot ability translates. But if I'm drafting a guy at number 3, even in this draft, I expect a little bit more in terms of individual playmaking. I think that people are missing the boat on him defensively. I think he's a bad defender. Yes, the counting stats are there, and maybe that does translate to the next level of being able to get some steals, playing in passing lanes, being able to block a jump shot here or there, chase one down. But he gets lost off of the ball. He's not big enough or strong enough, I think, to hold his own on the ball in college. So, again, because of this draft class, would I draft him 12, 13, 14? Yeah, probably so. Because I think there's a pretty clear role for him that he can carve out over the years. But would I draft him in a spot where I'm kind of trying to roll the dice and get an all-star? I just don't see it. To me, that translates perfectly into my thoughts on Rob Dillingham. To me, he is that sort of guy. I think that he does have the upside to be a, maybe not an all-star, because just like Reed, he is so small, 6'1", not uber long. He's like 160 pounds soaking wet. But he's pretty explosive, especially with the ball in his hands, which I think Reed lacks. Reed is vertically athletic, but he's not as end-to-end or laterally athletic and quick as Rob Dillingham is. And I think that the other issue with Rob, and I thought this coming into Kentucky, I think a lot of people labeled him as this coming out of Overtime Elite, transitioning to college ball. Would he take a bunch of bad shots? Would he be incredibly erratic? Would there be concerns about turnovers, et cetera, et cetera? And I think some of that is dispelled, and it seems like the NBA executives have kind of figured this out, despite some of the narrative that still remains around him. But he still gets labeled as this, maybe more erratic type of player, especially in comparison to Reed Sheppard. And like, the numbers just aren't there to suggest that. This is a guy that was like 49, 45, 80 shooting splits on high volume, average over 15 points per game. This is a guy that has an assist rate 29.8%, which was higher than Reed Sheppard's, relatively significantly. A turnover percentage of 15.6%, semi-significantly lower than Reed Sheppard's. So high assist, low turnover, incredibly efficient from the field. Everything about Rob Dillingham screams efficiency. You can say, well, he takes some bad shots, or maybe he tries to squeeze a pass into a tight window. But then the results indicate efficiency, trustworthiness, all of these different things that you would look for in a guard who also, oh, by the way, can create his own shot at the next level pretty darn well, in my opinion. If I were drafting, I would take Rob Dillingham over Reed Sheppard. To me, his ceiling is semi-significantly higher while still maintaining a pretty high floor as a guy who can make some shots and add some playmaking to your backcourt. But that's my opinion on those two guys. Catching up on a couple comments. Reese says, any plans to get the podcast on Apple? Yes. To be completely transparent, that's part of why I need some help. It's weird. I've had a podcast on Apple Podcasts before. I've gone through the process and done it. I screwed something up along the way in the process of the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show, and it's just kind of kept me from being able to figure out how to get it on there. I know it's not that hard. I honestly don't care enough right now to deal with figuring it out. That's just not the side of things that interest me. That's why I'm willing to pay somebody else to kind of help figure it out for me. So I'm going to be having a kind of a helping hand, a producer here within probably the next month. And then, yes, we will be on Apple Podcasts and everything's going to be better about the show. So just stay tight on that and bear with me in the meantime, sometimes being a little ignorant technologically speaking. Eddie says, I hope Reed goes fourth to be paired up with. Yeah, I mean, when you look at these mock drafts, it is exciting to see where the Spurs are picking. I mean, at this point, who doesn't want to be a part of what Wembanyama and the Spurs are doing? I saw a mock draft today, actually, and we're going to transition here into talking about Antonio Reeves a little bit, but had Antonio Reeves going to the second round to the Spurs, and like, I want that so bad for him because Antonio Reeves, shoot him all Antonio, like he's one of my favorite players, and I would love to see him succeed at the next level, and I think he can succeed at the next level with his shooting ability and how much better he got off of the dribble this year. I know he's still not super athletic. I know there's defensive concerns, but gosh, there's defensive concerns about the two guys we just talked about. And I think that in a draft that just isn't very good, when you get a guy that you know is going to score the basketball, an older dude who you can trust, isn't going to cause any problems, and can probably accept a role as an off the bench kind of microwave scorer and a high percentage shooter, I think there's some value to Antonio Reeves in the second round of this draft. And it would be awesome if he went to the San Antonio Spurs. But obviously also, as you mentioned, if Reed can just drop a spot, maybe because of a Houston Rockets trade, if we can get Reed to the Spurs, that would be awesome right there. Travis says I would 100% take Antonio in the second round. I agree. Like to me, and I'm obviously far from being a NBA GM. Well, maybe not that far. JJ Redick hosted a podcast and then became the Lakers coach. So maybe I'm overqualified for being an NBA GM. I don't know. But to me, that's what you look for in a second round guy. An older dude who's proven at the college level and has an elite skill. Like, I want my second round pick to, like, it's almost like taking a walk on. Like, I want my second round picks to know what they are. And I think Antonio Reeves will know what he is at the next level. He's going to stand there and take catch and shoot threes. And he's going to make almost half of them. So I really like him as a second round pick. Now, Justin Edwards is the other potential second round pick here. And there's, probably more variance as to the thoughts of Justin Edwards. Coming out of high school, potentially a projected number one pick sort of guy, one of the top prospects in high school basketball, was thought to be a one and done guy. We saw some flashes. I mean, heck, this dude scored like 27 points and was the best player on the floor against Alabama later in the season. But also, it took a while to get there. He was streaky at best for much of the season from three-point range. But I do like his left-handed stroke. I think he started to make them more consistently down the stretch. Ended up finishing 36.5% from three on pretty much one make per game. That's always my threshold. One make per game, 33.3%. That's for college. I would, for the projecting to the pros, I'd probably like it to be over 35%. 36.5%, I think this guy can make catch and shoot threes at the next level. Now, I don't think that he's overly explosive athletically, which was probably like a misevaluation of him coming out of high school. Now, I know he was unhappy with some of the strength and conditioning at Kentucky at the time. He felt like he gained too much weight and that held him back some with his explosiveness. So maybe that'll get right at the NBA level. But I worry about what he'll be able to do inside of the arc, even as a bigger guy, 6'7", 6'8", with some length, a little bit of athleticism. I don't know exactly what he'll get done offensively aside from some catch and shoot threes, but I can understand at 19 years old and the upside that he has why you're taking a flyer on a guy like Justin Edwards in the second round. Now, looking at the top of the draft, you have the Zachary Rasache guy. I think it is. It's funny. I think it's Versace. I was listening to something earlier. I always try to remember these pronunciations, and by the time I get around to saying them, I've said so many other words I kind of forget. But he's a Pro A guy from league in France, versatile guy, 6'8", that can really shoot it. I really spend no time diving into these international prospects. So I'm not going to act like I know a lot about Zachary Rasache, but must be pretty darn good. He's projected to be the number one pick. Seems like that's the trajectory that things are going tonight. And then Alex Sarr going number 2 for the Kentucky fans listening to this. Yes, that is the brother of Olivier Sarr. So I think those are your top 2 picks. That seems to be pretty much a consensus at this point in time. And interestingly enough, 2 Frenchmen going in the top 2 picks. And I think another one from the Pro A League over there is another projected top 10 pick. So it's a good night for France basketball. Big night coming up in the NBA draft for those guys. And like I had said earlier, Reed Sheppard, pretty much a consensus number 3 at this point. Just kind of running through the other top picks. Kind of seems like Matas Pazulis is up there. Stephon Castle is up there. Donovan Clingan, Stephon Castle's teammate at UConn, is up there as well. In some order, those are probably your next 3 picks. Again, pending some trades. It's moving and shaking around the draft. Now let's quickly, a little bit rapid fire here, and please continue to sound off in the comments if you have specific questions about NBA draft prospects, guys you like, guys you don't like, etc. But here are some players that I am high on going into tonight's NBA draft. First, Donovan Clingan, a good NBA player. He's 7'1", 7'2". He moves around really, really, really well for his size. To me, that's why he's clearly a better prospect than Zach Edey. Zach Edey is obviously just a slower, more plodding guy. Clingan is a pretty high-level defender, not just shot blocker, but I think he's a guy that he can hedge some ball screens in an NBA setting. He can move his feet at least to some extent with a guy on the perimeter. He can rim run. He can be more of a lob threat in the pick and roll, whereas I think Zach Edey is just a guy that, kind of, just duck you in and throw it to him around the basket. So I do think that Clingan can carve out a role as a 5-man in the NBA. But I will admit, and I think, it's probably why you're asking the question, Trav, like, I don't know if he's going to be a star by any means, but I think that's the case with a lot of these guys. Like I heard one of the kind of draft expert guys talk about how he felt like this draft was essentially starting at number 11. So, what that means is take your average NBA draft, 2020, 2021, whatever, and this year's top pick would have been the 11th pick, and obviously we can just shift backwards from there. And I think that's probably a pretty fair way to look at it, at least from how I see this draft, where your number 1 pick, you're kind of getting the value of what you would normally get at number 11. I'm interested to see if that actually means that there's going to be more trades because people don't really value these picks, but also it's like there's less trade value for the pick, so it might be harder to trade around tonight. We'll see how that goes. But Dalton Connect, I think I'm looking at this draft as, because there's a little bit less talent, I want guys who I know who they are. I feel like I know exactly what I'm getting at the NBA level with Dalton Connect. He's a bigger dude, 6'6", 6'7". He's very athletic. There's not, just like Reed Sheppard, there's nothing sneaky athletic about Reed Sheppard or Dalton Connect's athleticism just because they're white dudes. These guys are really, really athletic, and he can shoot the crap out of the ball. Now, I don't know if he's going to be a great playmaker at the next level. I don't know if he's going to be able to defend at the next level. But I do know that he has some size, he has some athleticism, and he can shoot the mess out of it. So I think that gives me a floor, even drafting at 6, 7, 8, 9, where it seems like Dalton Connect is projected to go. I really like what he brings. Yves Missy, the freshman from Baylor. Heck, I talked about this guy a lot throughout the college season. First saw him at Pangos All-American camp in Las Vegas a year or so ago. I love this guy. I think he is kind of your prototypical NBA 5-man now, where he is going to rim run. He's going to be a lob threat vertically, and he's going to protect the rim defensively. And he can also, he can catch it and face up and drive it right, 2 dribbles and lay it up. He can make a little face up 15-footer. I think that part of his game can continue to get better, but his motor is high, his verticality is high. I think Yves Missy, projected kind of like in the 20th range, I think he could be a steal, especially considering some of these other names that, again, I don't know exactly what they're going to be. Some of these international prospects, guys like Donovan Clingan, Zach Edey, etc., which we'll talk about Edey in a second. I really like that Yves Missy as, to me, one of the first centers I would be taking if I needed a center in this NBA class. Zach Edey, yes, I'm probably higher on him than some people too. I would probably draft him in the lottery tonight if I needed to, because I think that I have a hard time imagining that Zach Edey is not a long-time backup 5-man, because, again, I know what he is. Is he ever going to play 28 minutes a game in the NBA? Probably not on a good team, no. But can I play him, 8 minutes a half and try to get 12 points out of him by just throwing the ball inside? I think I can do that. He has a good enough touch around the basket. He's obviously, he's freaking massive. He makes his free throws. I think there's a world where he can, in year 3 or something, where he can, run down the floor behind everybody else and make a trail spot 3. I could see that happening. And again, I want guys where I know who they are. And I think that he is a backup 5-man that can score it in the NBA for you in a couple stretches per half and be serviceable. Similarly, Baylor Shireman from Creighton. To me, this is just probably not slightly, the less athletic version of Dalton Connect. That's why I like Dalton Connect. That's why I like Baylor Shireman. This guy, lefty, bigger, 6'7", probably 6'7", 6'8", and can really, really shoot it. So again, there is an NBA role for a guy like Baylor Shireman. And to me, if Dalton Connect is going 6, 7, 8, which again, I agree with because of his athleticism, then to me, Baylor Shireman is a surefire first-round pick, and I think could be a steal given the volatility of some of these guys that are probably going to go, in that 12 through 20 range, where you're definitely going to have, one or two of those guys probably going to hit, but a bunch of them are probably going to miss. I don't think that you're going to miss if you draft Baylor Shireman. For a lot of the same reasons I like Yves Missy, I really like Khalil Ware from Indiana. Didn't really work out for him as a freshman at Oregon, and then really worked out for him as a sophomore at IU. He's a guy like 7'1", really, really long, rim protector, rim runner, lob threat, everything that you want in a 5-man. This guy has a 7'4.5" wingspan, just under 7 foot with no shoes on, averaged 16 points, 10 rebounds per game this year, essentially, for Indiana. And also, it was pretty low volume. The guy made 42.5% of his threes. I think that, to me, there's a world where Khalil Ware is Miles Turner at the next level as he continues to improve his three-point shooting and up the volume. And this is a guy that can make open catch and shoot threes and then give you that athleticism at both ends of the floor around the basket that will be valuable in this draft. I'm drafting Khalil Ware high in this draft. There's honestly probably not very many names I would take over him, if I'm being completely honest. But to me, outside of the top 10, you're getting a steal in Khalil Ware this year. A couple more names that I really like. Terrence Shannon Jr. from Illinois obviously just got cleared of all the crap that was going on with him off of the court recently. But of that mold of Dalton Connect, Baylor Shireman, another bigger lefty guy, like 6'6", a little bit of length, a little bit of strength here. high percentage shooter. This guy's a really proven defender as well, which I think will translate. Like 3-and-D guys are all of the rage in the NBA right now. I don't know if there's a more proven 3-and-D guy hardly in this draft than Terrence Shannon Jr., and I'm seeing him towards the end of first-round mocks. Again, if I'm valuing guys that I know who they are, I'm not so sure I wouldn't be taking Terrence Shannon Jr. in the lottery of this draft if I was one of the guys picking. Now, especially once you get past like 15 to 20, to me, Terrence Shannon Jr. is a guy that we can look 12 years down the road, and this guy's averaged 13 points per game and has been a starter or, sixth, seventh man on some really good teams over the course of his career. And then also, the last name here, a little bit more of a deep cut. Later, this is a kind of a late second round pick that I think could end up being a first round value. AJ Mitchell at a UC Santa Barbara. He was a junior this past year, made almost 40% of his threes. That was a big jump from the prior years. It's still not huge volume, like 3 attempts per game. But I think if he can maintain that improved 3-point shooting with what he can do off of the dribble, this is a guy that creates his own shot at a pretty high level. He has a nice floater. He finishes at the rim. He's an all-around playmaker, averaged 4 rebounds a game, averaged 4 assists per game, plus 20 points last season. As a secondary creator with some length, proven guy at the college level, I would be moving AJ Mitchell from UC Santa Barbara up my second round draft boards. Quickly, a few guys that I'm not as high on. We'll just kind of run through these a little bit. Cam Christie from Minnesota. To me, it's almost like this is almost a case of like, we feel like because he went pro that, well, he must be a better prospect than what we all think. No, the guy wasn't that good as a freshman at Minnesota. He's extremely thin. He's only like 6'4". He's not as big as you think. No physicality. Was a streaky shooter at best. I don't really know exactly what people see in Cam Christie. Again, 6'4.5" he measured. Yes, he shot 39.1% from 3, but it was a little bit streaky. I don't know if he can do it much off of the dribble, but we'll see what happens. I mean, to me, this is a guy that really, outside of some of that shooting ability, has almost nothing. He's not going to give you anything inside of the arc, especially at this point with his physicality. I'm passing on Cam Christie in the second round. Tristan Da Silva, guy projected more in the first round. I think, well, let's see where they had him at here in the Ringer, 22nd to the Suns. Again, this is a guy that was a pretty high, or he's been a very high percentage 3-point shooter throughout his career. Pick and pop guy, but not much physicality to him. 6'8". He doesn't rebound. He gets pushed around inside. So now pretty much what I'm drafting here in the 20s is a pick and pop 6'8" 4-man who gives me nothing on the interior, is a bad defender, and is a bad rebounder. Can he really make enough threes to even be a serviceable backup when all of his other things are true? I just don't know if that's going to be the case. Ryan Dunn from Virginia. This is one to me where, like, at some point I need some production. And I know Virginia obviously plays a different style. Ryan Dunn might very well be one of the best defenders in this draft. His wingspan is incredible. He is bought in on that end of the floor, but he has no skill. Like, people aren't even respecting him from the mid-range. Like, people talk about Rondo closeouts going under ball screens. It's severe when Ryan Dunn has the ball. He is not going to be able to do anything. You won't even be able to drive it at all, and it's going to clog up. Like, you're not going to be able to feed the post when he's in the game. You're not going to be able to ball screen when he's in the game. You're not going to be able to create any driving lanes to the paint when he's in the game. I just don't know if he can be a good enough defender to be just a complete non-factor on the offensive end. I'm passing on Ryan Dunn from Virginia. And then probably towards the very top of the lottery, we already talked about some of my concerns about Reed Sheppard. I have some similar ones, honestly, about Stephon Castle from UConn. He's big. I like that. I think he can defend. I think that there's some overall like feel for the game and playmaking that Stephon Castle has, but this guy's already had a meniscus injury, a knee injury this season, and he can't shoot 26.3% this past season. So Can I take a guy who isn't like explosively athletic, already has a knee injury, and is a bad shooter? Like, is that really my fourth, fifth, sixth pick in the draft? I don't know. I like his size. Again, I like some of the playmaking, like what he can do on the defensive end of the floor. Just don't know if he has what it takes to be a top 5, 6 pick. But he's young. Like, I can understand taking a flyer on him at 10. I just don't know if I would take it there at 5. There you have it, I think, for a good run through of the draft. We talked about the Kentucky guys. We talked about the couple names at the very top of the draft. We talked about some guys that I'm buying stock in, some guys I'm selling stock in. Through it all, I think especially tonight, I'm just interested to see how it all shakes out. I think there isn't because the draft isn't thought of as being very good. I think you could see some crazier things happen where guys fly up draft boards and might have been mocked at 28, get drafted 13th, or you might see some more trades which really move and shake people up and down draft boards. Obviously, you have the Bronny James factor to this entire draft, and where, when, who, if at all, somebody makes a run at him to maybe get LeBron. Seems like that's kind of down to pretty much just the Lakers or the Suns, but that is going to be the cloud hanging over everything tonight, and certainly tomorrow night for the second round, is where and when does Bronny James get drafted. So there you have it for the 2024 NBA draft preview. Thank you all for tuning in. If you're watching this in the future, please leave a comment, and I'll get back to you there. Please make sure you like the video if you are still watching. Thank you all for tuning in live. Thank you for watching in the future. Please make sure you are subscribed to the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show here on YouTube, where you'll catch these live episodes every Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Also, find the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show on Spotify for podcast episodes Mondays and Fridays. Again, probably taking a couple weeks off of that. And then for all of my content, stay up to date on Twitter at BRamseyKSR. Thank you all for being here today, and enjoy the NBA draft both tonight and tomorrow for the second round. We'll talk to you next week.